So, hey guys, today we are talking about hand traps, and honestly, hand traps in general just are pretty horribly designed to an extent. So, for like our current game, let's just throw in simply like we don't even have to like mention Maxi, we can start with just Ash Blossom, right? So, a well-designed one would be like Gamma. Gamma honestly is not nearly as unfair as Ash Blossom. So, notably, Gamma, unless you're playing it in the archetype it belongs to, you won't be able to activate Gamma if you control any monsters. And there's just about zero decks that really abuse Gamma in an unfair way as of currently. But Gamma is also still kind of unfair in the fact that even if you were to normal negate this, it has no hard ones per turn. That just not having a hard ones per turn is the only thing pseudo unfair about Gamma. But I mean, if you're only running one driver, it doesn't super matter. And you can just if you can just tank the Gamma, you can still go on with your day, right? Gamma's effect is like fairly strong, but this is modern Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So let's assume we Gamma Snake Eye Ash. You can still normal summon Oak, right? And then still activate both of their effects just fine. And it's not problematic at all. So yeah. But with Ash Blossom Joe Spring, this card, like, it's a card you need to play, but let's not get twisted. Ash Blossom Joe Spring is pretty degenerate. So if we just focus mostly on just engine and pieces of interaction, right? So let's say we're against, okay, Snake Eye, all right? So let's say I successfully bait out the Snake Eye endboard. So everything my opponent has on their board is completely downed. All of their traps, so they for some reason have Silvera and also Startling Stare of the Snake Eyes, right? So I also have dealt with Apollosa. So all I need now is to like finish like resolving this one card. So let's say, just for example, it could be something like a branded fusion. It could be like, for example, uh, Ninjutsu Art Notebook of Mystery. So just whatever. I just have to resolve one card, and that's it. I am probably in a much better position, and I'm probably able to win after resolving this. Like, if not immediately, it will happen soon, right? But oh, one of my opponent's like 2 or 3 cards left in their hand was Ash Blossom Joy Spring. Hmm. So that means like pretty much no matter what I did, it didn't matter. There was no room to outplay Ash Blossom Joy Spring. A lot of the time, that's how it feels. Like in my head, it's like, okay, so I have Small World. So I can Small World here to get rid of this kind of like brick in my hand. Like, I don't know, let's say we have Petite Dragon. So I have Small World, and I can get rid of like this guy in my hand, the useless guy, and then I can grab Radiant, and then I can tribute over like my opponent's Baron or their like Chizao or something, right? And then from there we can play, right? And if my Small World gets negated by Baron, well, that's Baron negate gone, and I can do this other thing like I have triple tactics or change of heart or something that I can use on the Baron to trade for the Chizao's negate, and then if Chizao negate, I will just run over Chizao, and that back row, that set right there, I know that is Sword Soul Blackout. So if I run over the Chizao, I should be able to play for free for the rest of this turn. And I just need to find a way to ditch this Baron now. And then you just get hit by Blossom Joy Spring, and it's like, oh, cool. The rest of my hand is completely unplayable now, and there's no way for me to bait Baron. So there's no way for me to like triple tack, take Baron, or resolve triple tack anyways. There is nothing I can do because of the single card in my opponent's hand, Blossom Joy Spring, that they just happen to have. And I just happened not to have called by because yeah, I'm unlucky. So yeah. So that's the general kind of like gripe you gotta have with hand traps. So of course, hand traps can be used to play going like second in general. That's mostly why they were like made like this, because going first has gone pretty out of hand that we needed hand traps. But the issue is mainly in their design, being how they can be played super well for both going first and second. If only a few of them were like this, it would be actually less problematic, right? But just for example, if we just go through every single hand trap ever, okay? So we have draw, we have shifter, and then we have, while we're at it, we have Ghost Bell, Pro, Bestials, and all of these can be used on like essentially your own turn and your opponent's turn with varying success. Notably, like Crow is probably the least useful out of all these, but Bestials are just, you could say, like a better copy of Crow even. So let's go like this. And then we also have this and this. And technically this, I suppose. So, yeah. All of these cards can be used to play on your opponent's turn and your own turn, generically, without restrictions, pretty much. The only kind of restriction is on shifter, but not really. If I shifter on my turn, you still have to deal with my shifter the next turn, which is just completely stupid. Why does that work like that? Like, huh? What do you mean? Like, what? All right. So, even like a heinous effect like Dimension Shifter can almost be justified if it were like an archetypal hand trap type thing, right? Like if we look at Blackwing Chinook, Chinook is pretty strong, right? This is a targeted monster negate that also is a foolish burial goods. And this can also be used during the damage step, right? Or damage calc, right? So that's pretty good. But why is it exactly that you can use a powerful effect like Bestial Magnuma with no repercussion, right? Like no condition, like Cyphering Gear Gamma. This is just a raw quick effect you can use whenever, not a trigger like Cyphering Gear Gamma, right? And also, this, because it special summons itself, is not possible to call by. So how exactly do you play around Bestial Magnuma? And the fact that it's completely generic, like what? Now that's just dumb, right? And that applies to like all of these hand traps essentially. They're all generic, so you can use them on your opponent's turn after you full comboed. So let's assume we have, of course, Dimension Shifter, and then like Droll and Lockbird, I guess, wouldn't work because these two conflict. But you can still have like Ash Blossom Joy Spring after you Dimension Shifter on the first turn, and then set up like a full Kashtira board, just for example. How's that playable for someone? Like, what? Excuse me, what? Like, huh? What is this design, right? So honestly, the primary issue is these generics can be activated not just unconditionally, but also like that they can just be activated by either player on either turn, which adds more onto the ridiculousness. Like even if we go to Lancia, Lancia actually has like a somewhat reasonable condition. Effect Veiler kind of as well, but not really. Effect Veiler's condition honestly is almost meaningless. It just makes it worse than impermanence, honestly. That's about all it does. But yeah. So we have Artifact Lancia here. During your opponent's turn, if this set card in this one trap zone, wait, that's not the effect that matters. Quick effect, you attribute this card from your hand or your face-up field. Neither player can banish cards for the rest of this turn, so this is only on your opponent's turn. So you can't really use it on your own turn to stop your cards from getting banished or anything like that. So, alright, I guess. And then, aside from this, I think there was one more card worth looking at, right? Oh yeah, Imperm. So, Imperm, this can just be activated whenever, like, just if no cards are controlled, right? So this sounds like, oh, but then you can't activate this on your opponent that's going second, right? Wrong. You just set this, right? And then you can just activate this just fine. Okay, I guess. Sure. So if we had more conditional hand traps and these, and then more like generic hand traps, or not more generic, more like um, archetype specific hand traps, like for example Chinook, Rika, Princess, uh, things would be less annoying, honestly, in terms of just getting hand trapped. Like, yeah, it's pretty bad with how many we actually have. But then, like, another reason we have so many is that, like, Ash Blossom Joe Spring is useless against certain decks, where, like, Droll is literally what you would need to play, because something like Droll is actually necessary. Like, for example, Super Heavy Samurai, if we do normal summon Soul Piercer, there's no point where Ash Blossom and Joe Spring is useful anymore. You can use Ash Blossom Joe Spring literally whenever, and it does not matter. Literally does not. Like, being able to use these makes some sense, but right. We kind of need these. So the primary way to solve this that we have like left in this game of Yu-Gi-Oh right now is simply to have archetypes so ridiculous that these hand traps become less effective. Like just generic support for archetypes and stuff. So we just get a bunch of that, and these hand traps become less effective because our individual like cards become stronger. So for example, we have Tear Laments. So if we go to Tear Laments here, we have Sheeran, right? So Sheeran actually has multiple effects, essentially. This card basically has 3 effects printed on it. Other monsters, like, there are literally other monsters that only have one of the effects that Sheeran does. So, uh, special summon this card by sending a monster from your hand to the graveyard. They're literally monsters that only do this and don't even search. And there are a few that do search, but you're in Mills 3. And of course, Mill 3, doesn't that sound familiar? Like a certain Lightborn monster, perhaps? And then, of course, Fusion Summon by using this card as material and some other card in the graveyard. Where have I heard that before? DD Necroslime, perhaps? It's just something like that, for example. Okay. And all of those monsters I just, well, we kind of like kind of reference there. All of them only have one of the effects that Sharon does, which is maddening because this one card essentially has all 3 of those monsters as one card, which is a bit ridiculous. And then we have Rhino, kind of the same deal. Kid Kelos having multiple effects. Now imagine if Cheeseout did a search and then it did something else, like special summon a Sword Soul from deck and also add a Sword Soul spell trap. That's what Tearlament's Kid Kelos might as well read. That's like the equivalent, right? And also like Brillarino, this actually has removal attached to it, and this is also a search. And not just is it a search, it also makes your Tearlament monsters gain 500 attack. But just because. And also like Scream, 3 effects. As a search, as a mill effect, and also your opponents lose 500 attack. Just because, I guess. So some of these effects are not like as good as, like, for example, Sheeran's 3 effects slapped onto a card, but still 2 good effects that a singular card would used to have. It's pretty cracked, right? So in this case, if we have only a single Ash Blossom Joy Spring, that's like 1 point of interaction versus like the 10 things we would technically need to negate. Considering that if Tearlament, like, if we just unlimit all the Tearlament cards, right? A single mill 3 can basically end on like Salik with Rukelos at minimum. If you let like just the Sheeran resolve, for example, or normal summon Merly resolve. That's what would end up happening, and you don't have a good way to deal with that. And just to suffer a bit more, I guess. There was stuff like Sprite Elf to special summon back Merly on your opponent's turn to play even more. So, but when we look at all these points of interaction, Ash Blossom's Joyous Ring just becomes a completely worthless card. So it's just a matter of game balance, really. Like, will hand traps ever be like really fair feeling? I'm not sure. Like, you need them, but at the same time, you hate to see them. Like sometimes, right? I don't know. But also, like, if we look at some board breakers, it's like, um, Super Poly. Yo, my guys, how do I play around this? Discard one card, fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field as fusion material. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. Hmm. So let's say I do a decent combo, I end on a few pieces of interaction. It just gets all super polyed away. Okay, cool. Or sphere mode. Yeah, there goes all my interaction, I guess. Lava Golem, same thing. And not even respondable. And of course, there's still like Dark Ruler No More. There is Forbidden Droplet, which are all like not respondable. So nothing you can really do about that. So yeah, pretty awkward. But honestly, like at this point in the game, like I think we could unironically use some like kind of dumb cards. Like for example, like instead of like MST, we could get a card kind of like um I don't think there's like a card like this right now, but imagine a card that can just generically like destroy or banish one card on the field, or something like that. Destroy, banish, doesn't super matter. Just generically one card for no cost, but not as a quick effect. But the trade-off is that the card has some Utopia text on it, so it can never be like floodgated out. But it's not that strong of removal, so it's fair. And if you have protection, it'll still work, right? So this is text that isn't really uh, used that often, but if we look here, this affects activation, and effect cannot be negated. So the only way to stop this would prevent the card from being activatable in the first place, and that's about it, right? So anti-spell would technically work, so just imagine a card that literally reads, destroy one card on the field, this this effect and the effect and activation of this card effect cannot be negated. That would just be a pretty solid card to have, like just in the game in general. And it can still be responded to and whatnot. So it probably would target as well. So let's say you target something, your opponent can still activate that card. It's not like heinously unfair, but at least like a card like that would deal with some floodgates, right? So notably, Fossil Dyna and all that, you can't solemn this, right? And normally this isn't like that problematic, right? So I think that kind of card would be fair. I don't know. There's just a lot we could use. I'd rather have just in general though, like more powerful generic or non-generic hand traps, like archetypal hand traps, than more powerful like kind of just generic hand traps. Generic hand traps are pretty awful for the game in general, to an extent, right? Like since we already have all these and they don't have restrictions, future ones probably won't have restrictions either. So that's a little bit problematic as well. So yeah. That's just kind of how hand traps are. But they also just print some pretty heinous ones that are just completely useless. Heinous in quality, I mean, of course. So like if we look at Kribo, there's a bunch of like Kribo kind of like hand traps that just don't really do anything. Like Magic Kribo. Well, what does this card realistically do for you? Yeah, nothing. But then you think about Ash Blossom Spring, and yeah, this is pretty painful. I don't think there's like an immediate fix or anything for this, but uh, yeah, there is probably no immediate fix. But I guess we'll be seeing power creep happen. more and more now in the future. It's kind of like on that path, and there's not much we can do about it. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys for today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.